The city of Florence, Italy is known for its art and architecture. But is Florence worth visiting if you are not into art? Is it over-touristed these days or still a dream destination in Italy? I have been to Florence 4 times since 2014. So in this video, I'm sharing my honest take and best Florence travel tips to help you maximize your time there if you do decide to go. The first time I went to Florence was in 2014. It was while I was living in Madrid on a Fulbright grant and it was winter break. Some friends and I had just rung in the new year of 2014, wow, more than a decade ago, at the Colosseum in Rome. Magical. And then we were spending the first few days of the new year in Florence. In fact, I remember sitting up on Piazzale Michelangelo on January 1st, 2014, listening to some musician play Hotel California as we watched the sunset over the city of Florence. It was January, it was chilly and quiet. And of course, this was all, like I just said, more than a decade ago. So I'm sure that might have contributed to some degree to the overall quietness of the city. And when I say quietness here, I mean less crowds, essentially. Since that initial trip, I've also visited Florence again in May of 2017, in November of 2021, and then most recently, last September of 2024, which turned out to be my least favorite of all of the visits that I have made to Florence. Beyond the arts, Florence is a great city for foodies, and you don't have to be an art expert to appreciate the beauty that will be all around you if and when you go to Florence. As the capital of the Tuscany region, Florence is also a great base for day trips by train, rental car, or guided tour. Unlike what I've experienced in some other Italian cities, Florence also has an outstanding cafe culture. And by that I mean sitting down, being allowed to pull out your laptop and work, and that might be, some of you might be saying, groan, that's so obnoxious. As a digital nomad and someone who frequently works while I travel, this is something about Florence I really appreciate, and I wish there was more of this in Rome, where I hope to move. So yes, generally speaking, I would say that visiting Florence is worth it. In fact, I suspect anyone who has already visited Florence would say everyone should visit at least once if they can. However, I do think it matters when you go, like what time of year, and I also think it's worth considering alternative cities. On my most recent trip to Florence, both the heat and the crowds were just too much. Of course, I still had a great time with my family, and of course we made the most of it. It's Italy, for goodness sake. But I did find myself comparing this September 2024 visit with all of my previous visits again and again in my mind. Now, as a general rule, and this rule developed because I used to not do this and I learned the hard way, or the hot and sweaty way, I guess. I like to avoid Europe completely in July and August. My very first time in Italy spanned July and August, and it was sweltering hot, and I had an amazing time, but just so hot, I wouldn't choose it. My honeymoon in Croatia, I'm now divorced, but my honeymoon in Croatia was also during the month of August, sweltering hot, just too hot for me. I did think that visiting Florence at the end of September the way we did would make things not as hot, because we're kind of getting into fall and kind of getting into off season, but I learned that is not the case. Initially for this trip, so I took this trip most recently with my sister, brother-in-law, and my cutie toddler niece, and initially we were targeting October or even November for our visit, but we ended up going in September, largely based around my niece's school days. And not only was it super hot, but it turned out, which I didn't know beforehand, that our visit there overlapped with some big race that was happening. So the city of Florence, already pretty popular and crowded, became just overcrowded, if you can imagine that. But you know what this means? I have tips for you now. If you go to Florence anytime, but especially if you're planning to go during peak season, I'm about to give you my top recommendations and top tips to help you have the best possible experience despite the crowds. First of all, do your restaurant research well in advance and make all the reservations. I was shocked by how busy Florence's restaurant scene was, with hordes of people gathering around doors before opening time. It honestly felt like we were in cutthroat New York instead of a relaxed Italian city. Also, so many Florence restaurants are now social media hotspots, and if those are places that you have your heart set on eating at, you definitely need to book well in advance. Or let yourself get lost, get off the beaten track, ask some locals for recommendations, and go somewhere where you don't have to wait in super long lines. I will give you some of my food recommendations later on in this video. Another tip for really enjoying your time in Florence is to plan your sunset viewing thoughtfully. On every previous trip I have taken to Florence, I have had at least one evening dedicated to climbing up to Piazzale Michelangelo to watch the sun set over the city of Florence with the Duomo in the skyline. It's stunning. Usually someone is playing live music, and I really wanted to share this experience with my sister and my brother-in-law. I wanted them to experience that magical feeling and view of Florence too. Unfortunately, it was such a fail, especially in peak season, which I guess end of September is part of. If you want to watch the sunset over the city from Piazzale Michelangelo, go earlier than you think you will need to. I'm thinking like go several hours early and just sit there on the steps, because by the time that we got there, we couldn't even see the steps. Forget standing room only. Even standing up, you were not able to get the view that you want from up there, because there are people standing in front of you. There are people standing up on the stone railings, the barriers, whatever. It was madness. And so what we ended up doing was I took my niece and, you know, we saw some music and we kind of walked around the back area, and I just told my sister and brother-in-law, get up if you can and try to get a view of it. But it was just not the vibe that I was hoping to create for them. The views of the city from up there are truly iconic. They are worth seeing, but just brace yourself and prepare yourself that it's pretty hectic up there during sunset. Rightfully so, because it's that beautiful. But if you want the views without the crowds, here are some suggestions. Do go up to Piazzale Michelangelo, but maybe go up in the morning. I did a day tour. One of the first stops we took was to go to that piazza. I had never been in the morning. You still get the beautiful views minus the sunset colors in the sky, which I know it's not the same, but consider going there in the morning. Now, to actually watch sunset in the city of Florence, the best sunset view I ended up experiencing there was from the rooftop of the Duomo itself. This was such a cool experience. I booked this unique tour, and what is unique about it is only our tour group got private access to the terraces in addition to the main viewpoint, and only our tour group was inside the church at the very end until closing time and walked out and watched them lock the church up for the night. It was a pretty cool and intimate experience, and like I said, gave me spectacular sunset views. Plus, if you do this tour, which you can follow the QR code on the screen right now, and I'll put the link in description so you can book it too, highly recommend. If you do this tour, the ticket that they give you is actually good for 72 hours, and with that, you have a chance to go back and you'll have access to the baptistry, the bell tower, and the Duomo Museum on your own. If you want to read my review, you know, there are stairs involved and it might not be right for everyone. So if you want my full review so you know exactly what to expect before you book this tour, I'm putting a link in the description to my blog post write-up that I did all about everything you can expect. Alternatively, look into different rooftop restaurants and bars. There are plenty of them to choose from. Make your reservations in advance, and that way you can have a more relaxed sunset viewing experience in the city of Florence during peak season when it's super crowded. Where you choose to stay in Florence can also impact how enjoyable your experience is. In the past, I've actually really enjoyed staying super centrally, super close to the Duomo. On our recent trip in September, we stayed across the Ponte Vecchio on the other side of the river. It was nice. It was nice to be able to kind of get away from the main center crowds. Not that it wasn't crowded on our side, but not nearly as much. And I will say, I wasn't a huge fan of crossing over the Ponte Vecchio, which is that main beautiful historic bridge, because that of course obviously gets crowded during the day. There are other bridge options as well. They're just a little further out. But apart from that, I really liked the area we stayed in. The thing about Florence is it is super walkable. Now, people say that about most cities in Europe, and it's true, but Florence is compact enough and super walkable that I think you would be safe even booking slightly on the outskirts. So if that's of interest to you, because it may be more affordable to be a little bit more on the outskirts, it'll be less crowded. If you're comfortable walking and getting steps in, you should have no issue going going that route. I offer more detailed suggestions on where to stay and the best things to do in Florence in my 4-day Florence itinerary, which of course you can adapt to however many days you'll be in Florence for, and you can follow the QR code on the screen or the link in description to read that one. Another tip to help you enjoy your visit to Florence is to actually get out of Florence. Florence is a great base for day trips out to the rest of Tuscany. I took a full day-long tour of Tuscany and we went to 3 other areas and also had time for a long leisurely lunch with paired wine tastings at a 5th generation winery. I'm going to publish a separate video about that experience. Follow the link to go watch that. Another helpful tip to help you enjoy your time in Florence is to be mentally prepared for potentially a lot of crowds and a lot of heat, right? At the end of the day, it's also what we make of it. Are we able to laugh off and kind of roll our eyes and move on from the fact that maybe it's a little more crowded and a little hotter than we would have liked? That's what I did. And, you know, again, I still had a glorious time spending time with my niece and my sister and my brother-in-law in beautiful Tuscany, beautiful Florence. Even though I was also annoyed by the crowds and the heat, it didn't ruin my experience, but it could have if I had let it. Be open-minded about pivoting if the restaurant you want to eat at simply can't accommodate you or the activity you wanted to book is unavailable. Definitely build in extra time going from activity to activity. Get as many of your museum tickets in advance online as possible so you can avoid waiting in some of the long lines. One of my favorite things to do anytime I travel, but that I definitely did on this visit to Florence in September, was to wake up super early and be out the door before most of the city is even awake. So in this case, it was probably around like 7 or even 8, and I would just walk around and feel like I had the city mostly to myself. So it's a great way to feel a little bit of breathing room. Now, when it comes to the best things to see and do in Florence, we've already hit on some of the highlights, like climbing the Duomo, taking a day trip, visiting Piazzale Michelangelo, and crossing over the Ponte Vecchio. Other notable highlights include the Uffizi Gallery and the Accademia to see Michelangelo's David, and Piazza della Signoria. Hopefully I pronounced that right. On this trip, we also went to Boboli Gardens, which again, I had been to Florence several times before, and this was my first time going there. So if you have a tight itinerary, it's not necessarily something that you have to squeeze in if you want to see the highlights of Florence. But personally, I really enjoyed it. It felt nice and open. It was a great place for my toddler niece to run around for a while, and you get some pretty nice views over the city from up there too. Side note, if you are traveling with kids, the carousel in Piazza della Repubblica is also really fun, both for kids and for adults. I mean, I had a good time on there. That's the beauty of hanging out with kids, right? Is you get to be one. If you have been walking a ton throughout the center of Florence and need a break, one place where you can cool off and sit down for a little while is Cinema Odeon. It's part bookstore, part cinema, part work and rest area. We saw people sitting here with their laptops open. We came here personally to cool down and also to get a book. I buy my niece a book from every destination I travel to, so we did that there. And then Edward Scissorhands was playing on the screen. We just kind of sat there for a while as I looked up where to go for lunch. In Florence, we also took a cooking class, which is one of my favorite things to do when I travel. Follow the QR code on the screen to book the exact one we took. This was super fun, and it's in a quieter part of Florence, so it's also nice to kind of see another area and be, again, removed from some of those crowds. We got to meet other people. We made pasta, a couple different varieties. We made tiramisu. It was super fun for us, the adults. It was really enjoyable for my niece. She does still talk about it, so it's pretty cute, and it was fun. It was just a nice leisurely afternoon. Okay, speaking of cooking classes, now seems like a great time to talk about all of my food recommendations for you. I'm thinking let's start with savory and then we'll go to sweet. Chances are you have come across or will come across this famous panino shop, Al Antico Venaio. On all of my previous visits to Italy, I had never tried it because there was always a super long line, and I am not patient enough. And my mentality was always, I'm in Italy. There's good food all around me, and I don't need to wait in this super long line to have a panino. But this time, it turned out that they have now added locations of this shop in the Rome train station, Termini, upstairs, and also in the Florence train station. So on this trip, I had panino from there twice, and it's actually really good. Waiting in the train station to take our train from Rome to Florence, I ordered one there and I ate it on the train. And then before taking my train from Florence to Orvieto in Umbria, I also had one there. Is it something that I would stand in the long lines for? No. Especially not now that I know that there are no lines in the train station ones. So one of mine and my sister's favorite meals in Florence was right after we were hanging out at Cinema Odeon. I was looking on my phone to try to find us a place for lunch, and I hit the jackpot because not far from where we were was this place called Pizza Napoli 1955. And we're like, all right, let's get some Naples style pizza. It was in a busy area, but it was so delicious. The people were so kind. It's pretty packed, but they had a good amount of seating indoors, and we actually managed to snag a table outside. This was one of our best meals in Italy, and funnily enough, it's right across from another location of All'Antico Venaio, so if you'd rather have that, it's there. We also celebrated my sister's birthday on this trip with a steak dinner. Florentine steak. My sister picked the restaurant. We went to Il Latini. It was delicious. The ambiance was nice. It was super lively. Be prepared that Florentine steak is only prepared one way. It's only offered one way. This is not a meal that allows alterations. So if you want to try Florentine steak, I definitely recommend it. And please don't be that person who's like, can you do XYZ to it? No, just order something different. Another recommendation of where you might want to eat in Florence, this kind of balances savory and sweet, is Mercato Centrale, or the Central Market, where you can go, and it's basically like a giant food hall and lots of different options. It's pretty busy depending on where you go. We went like right in the middle of the day, peak time, but there were a lot of options and we all got to kind of pick what we wanted and sit down. Would I go back there? Probably not during the middle of the day. I just don't like to be in the thick of crowds. And the food was okay. There was nothing that we had that was, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever eaten, but I'm sure that exists in that market, and it may just be, you know, what we got. Everything was very good. None of it was super memorable to me as I sit here right now and try to recall it. Now for sweets, a breakfast place that I love in Florence. I have a huge sweet tooth, so I'm immediately excited by this turn from savory to sweet. Melaleuca? Who knows how to pronounce it? I'm probably saying it so wrong, but I'll put the name on the screen. It is kind of on the river, but a little bit further down, where you might not go unless you're going specifically to this bakery. It's a great place for breakfast / brunch, savory or sweet. And in particular, their cinnamon roll is like, you got to get their cinnamon roll. I also, speaking of social media popularized places, I went to Vivoli. And if you're doing your research on visiting Florence, you might have already come across it, but Vivoli is a gelateria and they have affogato that's like famous affogato. Right now, it's been popularized on TikTok. It's one of those places where you wait in line, but I was not going to wait in line. And the reason that I really made sure to go is because someone that I had met on my day trip, they had gone and they said it was worth it. So I was like, all right, let me just go try it. But I wasn't going to wait in line, which meant my goal was to be first. So because I'm an early riser and I already liked getting my morning walks in, I went first thing. There was one other couple in front of me. I was third in line, and when they opened, I got in, I ordered. Sadly, they weren't offering the pistachio version. I think maybe now they are. Maybe they were just out of it. That's what I really wanted. But I got the vanilla one and I sat down in their seating area and I enjoyed it. It was super balanced because you have the, really bold espresso, and then you have the gelato, the sweet gelato, obviously, and the hot espresso and the cold gelato. I mean, it was fun. It was good. Would I wait in line for it? No. I also wish that I had gone to another gelateria while I was there and tried their affogato. Not that I didn't go to other gelaterias, but I mean, I wish I had ordered an affogato elsewhere just so I could compare and see what is the reason for the hype behind the one at Vivoli. It was good. If you want one, go. You'll enjoy it. But I am personally curious, and so I vow to go back and try affogato in other places. It just was not something that I could order again and again because it's super rich. Of course, we had plenty of gelato on this trip. My favorite in Florence was from a place called La Sorbetteria, and it was on our side of the river, so like across from the side that the Duomo is on, and a little bit in. It was delicious. So good. If you've made it this far, at this point, you're probably decided on going to Florence. But if not, if you're like, okay, I'm intrigued, sounds like it could be fun, but are there other options? Let me tell you about where I went after Florence. Consider visiting the region of Umbria. Now, I only I only had a couple days, so I only was able to go to one place, and then I had to go to Greece. Life is so hard. So I only went to Orvieto, but I would love to go back and explore more of Umbria. And like, complete contrast to Florence in terms of crowds. The very first night that I went to Orvieto, and now I'm solo at this point in my trip because myself and my family parted ways. They came back home to Chicago and I was going to Greece for another 3 weeks. So I had a couple nights in Orvieto by myself, and I looked up a restaurant. I knew where I wanted to eat. I put my stuff down on my Airbnb and I'm like, I better get there super early because I had just been in Florence where people are crushing and rushing at the door to get seated as soon as the restaurant opens. I step out of my Airbnb and it is eerily silent. Like, there's not another soul around. It's like Twilight Zone. I'm the only human alive. I walk to the restaurant. It's super popular, super highly rated restaurant. I go in. I'm the only person. I'm seated. I'm eating my dinner by myself. I'm the only person in this restaurant. One other couple comes in at one point, and that's it. I don't think it's always like this. I'm sure there's high season that's more concentrated, maybe in the summer months, in the peak months. It was a little disconcerting for me. I think it was such a shock to my system to have so many people around me and to be traveling with my family, and then all of a sudden to not only be on the solo leg of my journey, but also like super solo, like isolated, alone in this place. And of course, I ran into people, you know, there are people there, people live there. And the next day I saw a lot more people, and there's life there, but it was just very quiet compared to Florence. So maybe that sounds super appealing to you. Even when we take out the crowd piece of the equation, Umbria and Orvieto are beautiful places that I think are underrated, somewhere you might want to consider. All depends on the atmosphere you're after. Wherever you choose, I firmly believe you cannot go wrong in Italy, so have the best trip. Ciao, ciao.